My name is Martin Zetterson, and in this video, I'm going to be showing you how to build a simple experiment using the builder interface in Psychopy. So first things first, in the video, I'm going to be stepping through this guide to building a two alternative force choice auditory word recognition task. It's a mouthful. That doesn't mean anything to you yet. Don't worry at all. And the link to this Google Doc will be in the description of the video. First, let's maybe talk about what the experiment is that we're going to be building together. So this gives you an overview of the basic trial structure. This is how it's going to work. Basically, we want to show participants two pictures, say a picture of a dog and a picture of a pig. And then once they click on this little star here in the middle, we're going to play them an auditory prompt like find the dog. And then participants will be able to click on one of the two images. So in this case, they might choose the dog since that matches the auditory prompt. That's it. What do we need to do to get set up? So there's two things you need to do. First off, what you're going to want to do is download Psychopy. So to do that, you can just go to your preferred search engine and just type install Psychopy, or you can follow the link in the Google Doc. And then what should pop up is a link to download the standalone version of Psychopy. That should be the first thing that you see on this installation page. Because I'm on a Mac, it's suggesting that I download the Mac version. Depending on your operating system, there might be a different recommendation. Okay, that's one. Second, what you're going to want to do is set up the initial experiment folder. Okay, so to do that, we're just going to go to the OSF page. And there you should find a folder called Animal Words. And all you're going to want to do is just, once you click on it, download that file as a zip. Once that's downloaded, you can just click on it and unzip it. And what I would suggest is putting it in a convenient place where you're going to work. So for instance, for me, that might just be on the desktop. So now we have Animal Words, that folder on the desktop, and that's going to contain two things. It's going to contain a trials.csv file. That's going to have some information about the individual trials that we're going to present. And it also will have a stimuli folder that's going to contain some of the images we're going to use, like this cool bear, or the dog that I just showed you, or a penguin, and some auditory files. Once you have installed Psychopy and have downloaded the Animal Words folder where we'll keep the experiment, now just open up Psychopy and a few windows will pop up, but the main one that we'll focus on is this one right here, the builder window. All right. Now, the very first thing I want you to do is just click on the Save Current File As button. And then in the Animal Words folder that you just downloaded, let's save this new experiment, calling it Animal Words, just like that folder name. So the first thing we want to do is build the basic trial. And the first step there is just to see if we can put a couple images on the screen. All right. So to do that, go over to the Components window over here, and either under Favorites or Stimuli, click on the Image component. And just like the name says, that's going to help us present an image. We're going to create two of those. So the first one, let's call it Left Image. And we want it to start right from the very beginning of the trial, so it's 0. And we want it just to continue to play. We don't want it to stop after a fixed amount of time. So we're just going to leave this field blank. And then the next thing we need to do is just choose which image we want to show. So go over here to this button to find the file that we want to show. That should open up in Animal Words, that folder that you downloaded. If not, maneuver over there and then open up the Stimuli folder. And then let's make this left image the dog. All right. Okay. If it looks something like this, the path says stimuli/dog.png, then you're on the right track. There's one other set of things we need to do. We need to tell Psychopy about how we want it to display the image. What's its size supposed to be? Where should it be on the screen in the first place. So for that, we're going to go to Layout, this tab right here. And then we're going to keep the size at this default of 0.5, 0.5. What does that mean? Well, in this case, what it means is that the image will be displayed at half, 0.5, half the height of the monitor window, okay? The default in Psychopy is to use what are known as height units. So they're just based on the height of whatever window is being used to display the experiment. You can see here that there are actually a bunch of other options for displaying for what these units will mean under size. And in the exercises that accompany this step-by-step guide, there will be some chances to kind of explore some of these other spatial units. But for now, we're just going to stick with height units and size of half the height of the experiment monitor. Okay, the other thing we want to do is set the position. The key thing to know here is that in Psychopy, the position 0, 0 is the center of the screen. And what we want is the image to appear to the left. So we're just going to shift this slightly to the left of our screen by going into negative values. So let's type in 0.4. That's just going to be a good shift to the left. Okay, so there's our first component. So let's add the second image, again, going to image component. Let's call this one right image. Again, we'll start from 0 and we'll leave the stop duration blank. And then for this one, let's pick the pig image. Okay, and then we also want to change the layout. So again, we're going to keep it at 0.5, 0.5. And this time, again, 0, 0 is the center. This time we want to go to the right. So we need to make this value positive. And let's make it 0.4 so that's symmetric with the other image. Okay, so now we have a left image and a right image. In fact, we kind of have the beginnings of an experiment already. So if you go to this green arrow here, then you'll be able to run the experiment. Before you do, it's good to know that the way to close an experiment in Psychopy is to use the escape button. So anytime you want, if you want to end the experiment, just hit the escape button. But let's run it, and it'll take a moment to open up. It'll also give us this little prompt. Just enter test here. So we're still in this testing phase. All right, and once it pops up, we're going to see two images. So there's our dog and there's our pig. Beautiful. Right, hit escape, and then you should pop right out of there. You'll notice that this Psychopy runner window opened when we pressed run the experiment. We'll talk a little bit more about that runner window later on. We might want to have these images pop out against the gray background just a little bit more. So what we're going to add next is two white rectangles that will be the background for our images, just to help them kind of stand out against the gray background. And fortunately for us, Psychopy also offers some components to draw these kinds of basic geometric shapes. So go over here to Components, Polygon. If you click on that, then it'll open up another properties window. So let's go ahead and make our left rectangle. We're going to call it left rectangle. It's going to have the same timing properties as the image. And then under shape, we're going to select rectangle. And then we're just going to control its position, same size as the image. And then we're going to adjust it to be in the same location as the left image. Okay, so now I have the left rectangle. And now let's add the right rectangle in the same way. And again, just adjust it a little bit to the right this time. Okay, so now we have our two rectangles in addition to our two images. Let's try and run it again and see if that helped. So if you ran this part as we just implemented it, you might have noticed something weird, which is that suddenly, well, we have these nice white rectangles, but our images are gone. What went wrong here? So what happened is that objects in Psychopy are rendered in the order in which they were added. So in this case, Psychopy is going to draw the left image, then the right image, then the left rectangle, then the right rectangle. So what happened is that the images are there, they're just hidden behind those white rectangles that we created. So all we need to do is move these two rectangle components upward. So if you right click on these objects, then you can move them to the top. So let's just do that real quick. And now if we run again, we're going to see that things are going to look a little bit better. So now your experiment should look like this, with our images sitting nicely on top of the new white rectangles that we added. So we have our images. Now what we want to add is sound. We want to be able to play an auditory prompt for participants. So go back over to components and click on and find the sound stimulus. And this will help us just add a sound to our experiment. So let's call this trial sound. Again, we're going to start from 0. And in this case, we know how long this auditory stimulus is going to be. It just happens to be 1.59 seconds. So about 1.5 seconds is how long this auditory stimulus is going to play. And let's go ahead and find one to choose. Let's choose the dog prompt. So dog.wave. Okay, that's all we need to set. All of the other defaults are going to work well for us. All right, so now we have our trial sound added. Now, the last thing we want to do to have a complete trial is we want to collect a response from participants. So for that, we're going to go back over to the Components tab and select from the response options, and one of them will be mouse. So go ahead and click on mouse. Let's go ahead and name it trial mouse. Again, we're going to want it to start from 0, and we want this again to run indefinitely until a participant chooses to click on something. What are they allowed to click on? Well, right now things are set such that the trial will end, that's the routine. It'll end on any click, okay? But what we want is we kind of want the trial to only end if they click on one of our two images. So what we're going to choose instead is to have the routine end on a valid click. And the final thing we need to decide is what are the things that participants can click on. So those are going to be our two images, right? So let's put in the names of our two images here. So that's going to be left image, and then we separate them with a comma. So left image, right image. Notice that what I'm doing here is I'm typing in the exact name of my image component here. So the same name that I gave it in the trial. Just to be safe, we're also going to put in the left rectangle and the right rectangle. That's just to make sure in case somebody's click is a little bit messy, they clicked on part of the box rather than the image itself, that will still be recorded as clicking on the picture. Okay, once we've defined those clickable stimuli, we should be all set to go. All right, so now we have all the key components. So we have the rectangles, the images, we have a sound that prompts participants to choose one of the two pictures, and then we collect a response from them with their mouse. So we click, so let's go ahead and run the experiment again and see if that all worked.
Where's the dog?
All right, so that looks and sounds great. We see our two pictures. We heard our trial sound, find the dog. And now we can choose which of the two pictures we want to click on. I'm a little bit of a maverick, so I'm going to click on the pig. All right, So now we have our kind of core trial together. And now I'd like to add a little bit of a cherry on top. So one thing that would be nice would be if participants could control when the sound started. So what we're going to add is a routine before our trial routine that allows participants to trigger the trial by clicking on a yellow star. Okay, so to do that, we're going to want to insert a new routine in front of our trial routine. So go ahead here to the bottom in our flow window and click on Insert Routine and New. And let's just call this Start, since it's going to be our starting screen. When I hit OK, you might have noticed that there's a little gray dot that pops up that allows us to control where in the experiment flow that start routine is going to show up. So in this case, we want that to be before our trial element. So go ahead and left click, and then it'll insert that start routine. And now if we click on start, we'll get this nice blank canvas to work with. All right. Now, what do we want to have be part of this start routine? Well, we want to show the same pictures that we did before. So the same pictures in this case of the dog and the pig together with those white backgrounds. And then we also want another visual element, namely a yellow star in the center of the screen that participants can click on. So we need that yellow star, and we need a mouse component that allows participants to click on that star. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing we want to do is just add those rectangles and images in exactly the same positions that we did before. So let's go ahead and start with the rectangles this time by clicking on the polygon stimulus. And if we type in left rectangle here, you'll notice that you'll get this little warning that tells us that the name is already in use. Basically, Psychopy doesn't want you to use the same names for multiple components, because that can lead to conflicts in setting the properties. So let's choose a different name. Let's call it start L rect instead, short for left rectangle, just to save us some typing. We're going to want it to have the same timing properties as the rectangle before. So start right at 0 and then leave the duration blank. So it just continues being displayed. And then the shape we want is the rectangle. And then for layout, we want it to be 0.5 again. And then we want to shift it slightly to the left, right? So make that x-axis slightly negative. Okay. So now for the right rectangle. So go ahead and click on polygon stimulus again. And let's call this right rectangle start R rect. Oops. Ooh. Start underscore R underscore rect. And then same timing parameters. And then for the shape, let's again make it a rectangle. And then for the layout, 0.5 again. And we're going to shift the X coordinate to the right. So positive 0.4. All right. Now we just want to add our images just like before. Let's give this another name again. So start underscore L underscore image. Same duration and timing parameters. And we wanted that left image to be the dog image again. So let's go ahead and click on that. And then in terms of layout, that's going to be just like our other left elements, size being 0.5 and the position being minus 0.4. On the x-axis. Okay, and let's create another image component. So let's type in start R image. Again, start from the beginning and play on indefinitely. Then for the stimulus, we're going to select the pig again. And for the layout, we're going to again make the size 0.5 and the position 0.40. Okay, so now we have our rectangles and all of our images back together in this start routine. The band is back together. The next element that we want to add is our star. Luckily for us, we can again use the polygon component. So let's go ahead and call this star. Again, we want that star to play from the beginning and to just continue playing until we get a response. So we keep this duration blank. And then if we go to the shape dropdown menu, we can see that actually there's a star element. So let's go ahead and use that one. Next, we want to control the layout. So we want it actually to be a little bit smaller. So let's make it 0.15, 0.15. But we do actually want it to show up in the center of the screen, so we can keep the position to be 0, 0. Now there's one final thing we want to edit, namely the appearance. So rather than being white, so you can see here that the fill color and the border color would be white by default. Let's make those values yellow. So the inside fill color, the inside color of the shape will be yellow, and then the outline, the border color, will also be yellow. Great, so now we have our yellow star. The last component that we want to add is, again, a mouse response from participants. So let's maneuver over and create a new mouse. You can call this our start mouse. That mouse will show up from the beginning and again, we'll continue looking for a mouse response until the participant clicks on a valid click, a valid object to click. And to make that happen, we again need to adjust the end routine press to be ending on any valid click. And in this case, we don't want the valid clicks to be any of the two images. We just want it to be that star element. So let's go ahead and make the clickable stimuli to be just the star. Again, the key thing here is that this name has to match this component. All right. Now we should be all set to go and have our core trial all set up. So to test that, we can go ahead and run the experiment again. Great, so now we see our two images, just the way we want them. And now there's a yellow star in the center. And when we click on that yellow star,
where's the dog?
We hear our audio stimulus, and now we can choose between the two images. I'll go ahead and choose a dog this time. Great, so now we have our a complete trial all set up. It's a little bit short though still, right? So ideally, what we want is to collect more than just one trial and test more than just one word. We'd like to be able to collect data on multiple trials and test kids on multiple words, right? So how do we do that? To introduce that structure into the experiment, we're going to have to learn about a new component, namely the loop component, which is going to allow us to cycle through elements in a spreadsheet. So the other element that's going to come into play here is, if you remember, in the animal words folder, there was a .csv file that was called trials.csv. That's going to specify the particular trials that participants are going to see. So if you open that up in, say, Excel, we can kind of look at the structure of this file. You'll see that there's a header column that specifies the different types of parameters. So L image is going to be the left image, R image is going to be the right image, target sound is going to be the sound that we play, and correct tells you whether the response was correct or not, or what the correct response was supposed to be, dog, in the case of the first trial. Each row corresponds to a given trial. So that first row corresponds to the trial that we just created, right? Or at least it's using the same elements. There's a dog on the left and a pig on the right. And then the target sound is dog. And as we move down, each new row is another trial. So for example, that last trial is going to show a tiger on the left, a penguin on the right, and then play the penguin auditory prompt. Okay, so to put all of these things together into our Psychopy experiment, let's go ahead and maneuver back down to the flow window and click Insert Loop. When I do, you're going to notice that a little gray dot is going to pop up. That, again, is going to allow us to control the positioning of the loop. So we want the loop to start at the very beginning, before that first start screen. So go ahead and maneuver the gray dot over there and then left click to set it to begin at that position. And then a second gray dot will show up that will allow us to control where the loop will end. We want that loop to encompass both the start and the trial routine. So go ahead and put that at the end and left click again. And now when you do, loop properties window will pop up that will allow us to set some of the, the core properties of our loop. We can go ahead and keep the name as trials, and but we want to set the loop type in this case to be sequential. So this means that the loop will go through each of the trials that we specify in our conditions file. That's our trials.csv file. It'll just go through those in order sequentially. The other parameter that we're going to set is nreps. We're just going to make that 1. That just means that we're not going to repeat any of those trials. We're just going to play each of them once. It's just a good place to start. And then the final thing we need to set is the conditions file. So we want that to be our trials.csv file that we've been looking at. So go ahead and maneuver over to this file button and then select trials.csv. Okay, and something fun happened here. It actually automatically tells us that it recognized 4 different conditions that I can set. L image, that was that L image column that specifies the left image, the right image column, the target sound, and what the correct selection is. So let's go ahead and hit OK. And now we have our loop all set up. You'll see that we get this really nice visualization here at the bottom that shows us what's going to happen in the experiment, right? We're going to go through and see the start screen and then the trial routine. And then it's going to loop back to the beginning and begin again. So there's one more crucial thing that we need to do in order to take advantage of this new loop component that we built. We need some way to tell our images and our sounds to update each time we repeat through the loop. And we want them to update based on the images and sounds that we specified in our trials.csv file. How do we do that? Well, let's go over to start and have a look at that, our image components. So if you click on Start L image, you can see right now what's happening is that we're always presenting the same image. We're always going to be presenting the dog image. What we need is to tell it to, instead of always presenting the dog image, to update the image each time we loop through based on whatever image is specified in the trials spreadsheet. The way to do that is to type in $, and the $, just tells Psychopy that a variable is coming up, a parameter is coming up, something that gets set, in this case, based on our conditions file. So enter that $, symbol, and then the column from the trial spreadsheet that we want it to use. In this case, we want it to use L_image. This is an L, not an I. So $L_image. And again, what that's going to do is it's going to tell this image component to look in the trial spreadsheet under the column L image each time it updates. So on the first update, it's going to present stimuli, the dog picture. On the second one, it's going to present penguin. On the third, pig, and so on. There's one more thing we need to do to make sure that it updates correctly. Over here in the drop-down menu, instead of constant, we need to set this to set every repeat. That just tells it to keep on updating this value each loop. All right, that's all we need to do. We're going to do the same thing with the right image, have the right image also update automatically on each new loop. And here we want it to use the column R_image from the trial spreadsheet, right? So we type in $R_image. Again, we want it to set every repeat. All right, so now our start routine is going to update each loop through a row of the trial spreadsheet. Now we just want to do the same for trial. So for left image, we want this also to update based on what's in the L_image column in our trials file. Again, set every repeat. And same thing for the right image. Again, set every repeat. Okay, and then the last element that we just want to edit is the sound. So go ahead and click on trial sound. And then in the trials spreadsheet, the column we want to use for this is the one called target_sound. So that's the value that we're going to enter in here in the sound field. So we're going to make this $, again, to tell it that it's a parameter from our trial spreadsheet, $target_sound, because target_sound is the column from the trial spreadsheet that we want to use. And again, we're going to set this to repeat each iteration through the loop. Okay, so now we can take full advantage of the loop because our images and our sounds are going to update each time we cycle through. Just to check that that's working, we can click the green run button again. So this trial looks just like it did before. We have the dog and the pig. We click on the yellow star, we'll get the sound.
Where's the dog?
We'll choose the dog. And now we can see that our loop is working, right? Now we see a penguin and a tiger, 2 new images. When we hit the yellow star,
Where's the tiger?
we get a new target sound. And then we're just going to iterate through all the trials that are in our spreadsheet.
Find the pig. Find the penguin.
Great, so we saw 4 trials that correspond to the 4 rows in our spreadsheet. And if you look back at the spreadsheet again, you can kind of confirm in the first trial, we were tested on dog and then tiger, then we were tested on pig and finally penguin. All right, so there's one other tip that I wanted to pass along, namely, how do I figure out if I did something wrong, what the error is? So for that, the Psychopy runner window is super useful. That's that little window that keeps popping up and giving you little warning messages along the way. So for example, let's say that I accidentally forgot the $sign here in my start routine for the left image. Now the experiment won't really know what to do with L_image because there's no picture with that name in the experiment folder, right? So if I go to run the study, it's going to crash. Now, what the runner window will tell me is it'll kind of give me a hint about what that error was that happened. So if I go to the Psychopy runner window after the crash, it's going to give me this little error message, couldn't find image L_image, check path. So it's basically telling me, hey, I couldn't find a picture with this kind of name. Are you sure that you supplied the right value there? So that can be a hint for me to go back and like, oh, I forgot something here. In this case, I just forgot to tell Psychopy that this is actually a variable that it needs to look up in the conditions file. There's one more thing I want to touch on at the end of this video, and it's a crucial bit, namely, how do I get the data from my experiment? And luckily for us, Psychopy automatically stores a bunch of the core data that we're interested in whenever we build a new experiment in the builder interface. So to see what data gets stored, let's go ahead and open up our experiment folder, animal words. And you might have noticed that the first time that you ran the experiment, a new folder actually got created called data. If you open that up, you'll see that for each time that we ran the study, and in my case, recording this video was quite a lot, for each time it stored a new set of data files. There's always, for each run of the experiment, there are 3 types. There's a .csv file, which is kind of the core data from the experiment. There's a .log file. And what that is a kind of a rundown of all of the events that happened on the screen and the exact time at which they occurred. So it gives you just a careful log of everything that went down in your experiment, so to speak. And then the final data type that gets stored is this scidat object. And that's only really interesting if you're planning to analyze the data in Python, in which case it stores the data in a very convenient format for analyzing in Python. But let's go ahead and look at that first file, the .csv that I mentioned. So if we open that up, what we'll see is that it contains a row for each trial of our experiment. So these are the 4 trials that we completed. These first 2 columns we'll probably recognize. Those are those columns from our trials.csv file that tell us which images and which sounds were played on each trial. And then if we scroll across, we'll also see some timing information about the various elements that we showed on a given trial. And it'll also give us information about the mouse responses that we collected, including here at the end, which images we selected on each trial. So you can see that I selected the left image, then the right image, and then the left image again, and finally the right image. So it basically stores all the key data that we care about from the experiment. So if you're interested in working a bit more with this experiment that we built, in the description of the video, you'll find a link to a Google Doc with exercises. This is what it'll look like. And basically, this will give you some new features to add on to the experiment, some new aspects of Psychopy to explore, including ways to shift what kind of data gets stored. And the most fun bit, it'll also show you how to add custom code into your experiment in Python and Psychopy. And that will give you really a lot of flexibility when coding up experiments on your own. All right, that's it from my side. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you have any questions at all, feel free to email me at the email address that you'll find in the Google Doc guide. And have fun making experiments in Psychopy.